is there no way that you can, I mean, this sounds like this is going to be so ridiculous, but is it possible, I guess, for some advanced people to be able to turn everything into something sacred? Like, if everything, can't you see everything as a creation of God, even of the world?
I think talking about it is easy.
Yeah.
You know, I think applying that principle to everyday life is very, very, very difficult, if not altogether impossible. Um, no, I don't think you can. I don't think you can go into life and expect yourself to remain, you know, uncontaminated. It won't work. I don't think it'll work. And usually when I hear someone, whether it's on one of those, you know, YouTube gurus saying that enjoy the world and also be spiritual, it's very hard for me to digest. And it may be just me, you know, that, you know, I'm still somewhat of a novice when it comes to these things. And I'm not like an Eckhart Tolle where I can, you know, exercise alchemy and turn every metal into gold. I can't do that. There is only so much trash you can intake from the world before you explode. You know, I think even if you were to look at the book of Job, for example, I mean, he's a great man, you know, at least at the beginning of the book, until his life begins to fall apart. Then the human part of him comes out, you know. And little by little you see that he's losing his faith, you know. He becomes skeptical. He questions justice and fairness and God's knowledge and all that. To the point that he begins to fight everybody. You know, he begins to fight his friends. He fights his wife in a nice way. And then he fights God. You know, if you're a chef, this place everywhere. So the cook goes to the kitchen around 4:30. From 4:30 till about 10 o'clock or so, he's just constantly making things. He takes raw ingredients and he turns them into these delicious foods. You know, I don't know whether he enjoyed doing what he was doing, but all I know is that this particular chef, he took raw, dense materials and turned them into something beautiful and delicious for about 6 hours every night. You know, if that is your life, you know, you can't do it 24/7, but you can certainly do it for 5-6 hours. And that's what you do in the classroom. You know, you go to your first class and you turn ideas into magic. Then your next class starts 15 minutes after, you know, the first one ends. You walk to that, you kind of chit-chat with a few friends or students, kind of laugh, and then you walk in the classroom and you do a few icebreakers, and then the ideas begin. And then you cook ideas for another hour and 15 minutes, and that ends. And then you go to your office and you have a Zoom session. And all of a sudden you realize that from 8 in the morning till about 12 you've been cooking ideas, you've been very, very focused, and it comes to you very naturally. You become the center where above and below they meet each other. Through you there is this beautiful marriage, and the expression inspires the audience. But when you're not in that particular space, you can't just walk around aimlessly. Imagine that in a few weeks your summer class will start, and you'll have classes from 9 in the morning till about 2 in the afternoon. Once it's done, you take a nap, you call Cassie and Stacy, and you say, let's meet at Cassie's house. And you guys will go there, and you'll have some dinner, you'll chit-chat about your classes. And then, after dinner, you guys sit and you begin to have a very serious and meaningful and fruitful conversation. And all of a sudden, as you're driving home, you say, man, I had a great day. Had great classes for about 5 hours, and rested a little bit, went to Cassie's, and these are good friends I have, and we talked. And that was also quite inspiring. And you realize that you spend, 6, 7, 8 hours of your day talking about things that you really, really, really enjoy. There wasn't any sense of loneliness. Even if there was loneliness, it was meaningful. It was something that you could tolerate. I try to make Rome meaningful. I try to make Florence meaningful, but I just couldn't. Rome was very different than Florence. Florence reminded me of a brothel. It's like it's like a prostitution space where people see this great cathedral, which is beautiful. It took centuries perhaps to build. They go, they take a picture, they go inside, they take a picture, and they come out, they leave. There is no spirit of the law that's going to infect any of them. And that's what tourism basically is. It becomes a house of prostitution. You have people from all over the world going in, coming out, going in, coming out, going in, coming out. The Strange Life of Ivan Osokin by Ouspensky. I forget what chapter it was, chapter 38 or 28 or 19 or something, where Osokin finds himself in the magician's house. And all of a sudden he feels as if he's been here before. And the magician tells him, yes, you've been here before. And he asks the magician if the magician has the power to send him back in time so he could correct his mistakes. He could live a different life. The magician said, yes, I could take you back all the way to your childhood. And Osokin jumps and says, can I go all the way back to my childhood with all the knowledge that I have today? It's like, can I go back to being 5, but having a brain of a 65-year-old? And the magician says, yeah, of course I can do that for you. But it's one thing to know, but it's very different to know how to apply what you know. And because it becomes so painful, you will do whatever you can to forget everything that you know. You know. I think sometimes these ideas become unbearable. They become very difficult to carry on a daily basis. And so, we're all crafty enough to find distractions, to forget, or to lessen its intensity, because then it unburdens us. I don't know if this was even related to your question, but
Makes me think about the Gospel of Thomas, where he says, if you bring forth what's inside you, it'll save you, and if you don't, it'll destroy you. So it seems like that's kind of what you're saying. Like, these things have to have an expression, but that's, like you said, it's just so hard, because it just feels like the world is just out to take everything away from you and distract you, and so.
I mean, first it takes a while to kind of figure out what sort of music plays inside you, you know. And then once you figure out what, your own tempo is, because you've been in the habit of listening to other people's tempo, it becomes difficult to just listen to your own. You feel bad, you feel guilty, you feel as an outcast. It makes you feel lonely and isolated in many ways. And so it takes many, many, many months, if not years, to say, you know what, this is who I am, this is what I am. I don't really care what people or society thinks. So it takes a while to figure out, what your own voice is. But because it's never been expressed, it needs a container. And it takes another few years to figure out how to put, what lives inside you into the proper containers. And you're going to mess up for a long, long time. First, because you don't have sufficient practice, then you don't really find the proper ears to speak to them about the voice inside you. So not only are you clumsy in expressing, but because you find the wrong people, your expression becomes a point where disagreements and eventually disharmony comes about. A conversation turns into a fight, an argument, and then something that's supposed to bring about harmony and calmness, understanding, insight, all of a sudden turns into, some ridiculous back and forth about useless things. Like, does God exist? I mean, I don't really care. Then when you find your voice and when you find the container through which it can be expressed properly, And after that, you realize that you should not give that which is holy unto dogs. It took you a while to figure out your voice. You come to realize it is yours, it is sacred. It's not created by society. It's really through your own effort, sweat, and blood. But because you were a novice, you were young and inexperienced, you kind of just gave it freely to people. And most often it didn't end well for you. And then you walk in the classroom and you begin to do your stuff. And once in a while you see someone's eyes turn on, you know. That becomes your customer. That becomes your mirror. And that's the only person who is able to listen but not understand, you know. Because what usually happens is you hear things. It's mostly noise. And then all of a sudden, this noise triggers part of you. Then you begin to listen. You don't listen to the entire thing. You just listen to those keywords, okay? And when you begin to focus your listening on those keywords, now you begin to hear. So initially hearing is just basically noise coming your way. If it doesn't trigger parts of you, it remains just noise being heard. If there is a trigger, now you pay attention. Now you listen. And in listening, if the person is able to articulate what he or she is, expressing, then you can begin to listen out of that hearing, or hear to what listening. And then if that continues, then somehow understanding can be grown inside you. And the other thing is, this saying is not expressed by some guy in the street. It's being expressed by Jesus. And if you want to, talk about what Jesus said in any of the Gospels, it's always important to kind of remember his life and how he got to kind of be insightful and relatively wise in his short little life. Consider his experience in the Garden of Gethsemane. Let this cup pass by me. There were all these things inside him that wanted to be expressed, wanted to be shared. There were just no ears that could hear. He felt alone and isolated. He just didn't want to do it anymore. He couldn't find anyone worthy enough for his message. So he just said, I just don't want to do this anymore. And then very quickly he kind of just collects himself and he says, oh, I made a mistake, or even on the cross when he feels completely alone, until one of the two thieves says, remember me when you enter your kingdom. And all of a sudden he sees, his better version of himself in this other thief. And he once again remembers who he is, and he says, fine, when I die you'll be on my left side or right side or whatever. We'll both approach God and we'll say, hey, what's going on? I think it's a great saying, but it's a saying that is I think really, really complex because Jesus was complex, And I don't think you need to be spiritual to use that particular saying of his. Life is a traumatic experience. You know, we are harassed and brutalized on a daily basis by forces we don't really understand. And it's frustrating, you know. Cassie this morning, forgive me, said, "Listen, my back, it's really hurting. Maybe I shouldn't come. I want to come, but maybe I shouldn't come because I don't want to disrupt the gathering or the space." From one stance she wants to come, from a different stance there is this real pain that lives inside her. Because we've been friends for 20 years, and because she trusts me and I trust her, and there is friendship. She says, "Amir, listen, I'm going to tell you what lives inside me. My back is hurting me. I may just want to leave at 10:30. Now imagine if she didn't want to say those things, and then her back was to hurt, and she had to sit here till midnight. She would probably, on the way home, she would scream at herself and maybe say awful things about everybody here because we keep rambling on, not noticing, her backache. I think whenever you embody something authentically and genuinely and honestly, you just need to express it. I just don't know how far you want to take that and in what branch in life. I dislike when I walk in Safeway and a 3-year-old is throwing a temper tantrum and the mother, bends down and says, "Honey, tell me, how do you feel?" It's like all of a sudden at the age of 3 you have a therapy session. You wonder what is going to happen to this 3-year-old when he becomes 15. Not everything that lives inside you is worthy of expression. So there was an episode on Friends where some girl turns to some guy and says, I don't feel the same way about you anymore. I love you, I'm just no longer in love with you. Okay, well, that lived inside you, now you expressed it. So what does the poor guy want to do? He can't babysit you. Would you want him to take you on a cruise? Sometimes you just need to have the stamina, the capacity to hold certain things inside you. Not everything needs to be shared. And I think because the saying comes from Jesus, and because Jesus is a religious, spiritual human being, gone through all these different spiritual journeys, he has found his voice. And when there is no one to listen to him, when there are no customers, his emotions and his thoughts begin to haunt him, imagine you want to throw a party. It's your birthday party and you invite like 200 people to your house. It's on a Saturday, and you told everybody a week in advance. So Monday, 5 people call you and say, sorry, we can't make it. Tuesday, 25 people call you saying they can't make it. Wednesday, 10 people call you. Thursday, 20 people call you. Friday, 20 people call you. Saturday comes and there are only 20 people and you've made food for 200 people. And then you keep waiting and waiting and waiting for others to show up, but nobody shows up. And you kind of look at yourself and say, really? You begin to think about time you spent making this party, money you spent preparing for the food and all that stuff. And then you begin to kind of question yourself and your own sanity. Why did you have to go through all this trouble only to have people cancel on you? Was it really worth it? And the answer is no. So if you have a man going away for 18 years, coming back with a load of goods, but there is no one to receive the goods, you're going to kind of second guess yourself and hate yourself and hate people.